Roseanne Barr is blaming Ambien for a racist comment on Twitter. She wrote, she's done weird stuff while on Ambien at 2 in the morning, and it's now trending on Twitter, the word Ambien.
The word Ambien, yeah, but that's not the only thing that she blamed throughout a very active Twitter evening. Barr is referring to the highly controversial tweet that she posted yesterday morning saying President Obama's former advisor, Valerie Jarrett, is the daughter of an ape and someone from the Muslim Brotherhood. BuzzFeed News reporter Sylvia Obell is here to talk a little bit more about this. So, Sylvia, you know, there has been a lot of obvious outrage over the tweet, but a lot of talk about ABC. That, you know, applauding them for canceling the show so quickly, but also that they knew what they were getting in Roseanne Barr. It's not the first time she's tweeted about a black woman and compared that woman to an ape. She did it with Susan Rice several years ago. So they took a risk.
Right.
The risk paid off a little bit for them. They had an extremely popular show. I think, you know, a New York Times article said they probably made $45 million off of this show. Yeah. So what does that say about just where we are?
I mean, I think it's really a sign of, I think it's really the first time we saw how the Trump era was really reflected onto pop culture and television, like literally like sitcoms. I think a lot of times you think about during Obama's era, we got Blackish and we got all these other sitcoms, and that's really when Hollywood Murder and Scandal, like we talked about before, really popped off. And it was kind of, I think people were really interested to see if the opposite would also take place. I think a lot of companies, a lot of networks, it really made sense to them, like, oh, okay, this is now the majority. We thought the majority was something else, and now this is what it looks like. How can we kind of give them something? And I think Roseanne was ABC's way of maybe trying to do so, since they tend to be more liberal in a lot of the time. Right. So I do think that was the case there, and it did pay off because it was like the #1 rated. Those ratings were things that we hadn't seen in such a long time. Yeah. But to your point, it's not. They knew that they were taking a risk with Roseanne. And I think the difference now is that now they know that she's actually just a liability and not just racist or ignorant, or, you know, she just can't be controlled.
Right.
And what's something that Ben Sherwood, an ABC executive, did say, he pointed out that Roseanne cannot be controlled. I thought it was interesting. Kevin Frazier of Entertainment Tonight said something to me, which I think needs to be highlighted. He talked about the fact that ABC Entertainment is led by an African-American woman, Channing Dungey.
Yes, Channing.
And he said it would be, you know, how you could go to work every day knowing that a star that works for you, essentially, called another African-American high-ranking woman, it doesn't matter if she's high-ranking or not, just another person of color, and compared them to an ape. You saw the reaction on Twitter from people in the ABC stable of stars. Shonda Rhimes tweeted this, but honestly, she got what she deserved. As I tell my 4-year-old, one makes a choice with one's actions. Roseanne made a choice, a racist one. ABC made a choice, a human one. What do you think of the reaction?
I think whether it was Channing or Shonda or Viola Davis or Kenya Burris, because I believe all of them spoke out, it was clear that a lot of people were biting their tongues, you know, because of this show. And I think they were it was clear, I think their relief is real, and like their feelings about it are like, thank God this is happening. I think Channing's response was, you know, pointed to the point, like she really pierced in through the middle there. But I do think that for ABC, we can't just say it was just a moral choice. You know what I mean? I think at the end of the day, it was also about being a liability that hurts the bottom line, that hurts money, that hurts advertising. So I think at the end of the day, as much as it was amazing to see a racist act to be handled so swiftly. You know, I think I tweeted that it's kind of like a solar eclipse, stunning and rare to see, you know, a racist act to be punished so fast and, you know, just taken down so quickly. So I kudos to ABC for that. But I do think it needs to be clear that, like, this was, like you said, not the first time she said something.
Well, here's the thing. I have a question, because certainly ABC saw that there was an opportunity here to take a segment of this society who felt that their values and their priorities were not well represented in Hollywood, and to create a show around that. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. There should be more of that. That should be championed. On the other hand, we heard a few weeks ago that there was an episode of Blackish that was pulled for some reason. We have no understanding as to why that may have happened, but it perhaps had to do with something controversial on a show that is predominantly African American. I wonder if you have any insights into what may have happened where ABC said, you know what, you can't run that episode of Blackish, but we can have somebody like Roseanne Barr leading our #1 show.
Yeah, well, nobody knows for sure. I mean, I know a lot of news reports. People have tried to find out what it is, but they are keeping that one pretty under wraps as far as like what the exact contents are. I've heard rumors that it could have been about the football and kneeling and those kind of things, which makes you think that maybe, ABC is owned by Disney, which also owns ESPN and all this other, which, depends heavily on football. And it could have been like that sort of a thing. But it does make it clear that sometimes it's like, okay, here's a moment where it's easy to be moral and let's do it. And moments where it's like, oh, we want to be, but we can't because of all these other things. And I do think, business is business, and we can't pretend like anytime something happens, we're being swift about it, because that's not what's happening. And they did, like you said, make that decision. They decided that one was more too risky compared to Roseanne. I think it's really about, we just have to kind of read what they're choosing as liable and what's not.
Right. You wrote an article, why it's harder for black audiences to watch Roseanne the second time around. Talk about, what you saw and why you saw this to be a problem for black families.
Well, from episode one,
because people are saying free speech, so
yes.
let's talk a little bit more about it.
So, it wasn't just, I think, the fact that they made Roseanne a Trump supporter. I mean, because she was in real life, and then she so they made her character went on the show, which kind of was really, I think, jarring to a lot of the black audience that loved Roseanne in the 90s, because, like I wrote, they were the working class family on TV, on network television. A lot of black families, not a lot, but there are some working class black families that were able to relate to them more than the Huxtables, because, the Huxtables were a doctor and a lawyer, and they lived in this beautiful brownstone in Brooklyn, but Roseanne, and, it was a show for the working class. And then to make that show then her a Trump supporter, it kind of completely flipped it on people who were like, oh, what? I didn't think Roseanne, who was this feminist, hard, like sassy mom, all of a sudden becoming this way, I think was very jarring. And I think on top of that, the way they chose to kind of angle some of the political debate, it wasn't thorough, and I think that's why it was also hard to connect, because it wasn't just about watching somebody who political views were different than yours. It was about watching them, make a casual joke about kneeling, but not explain why. You know what I mean? Like, I think there was a scene at the dinner table where she told Jackie, who is framed as the Hillary supporter in the family, to try to say that they're showing both sides. But you're saying to Jackie, oh, do you want to take a knee while we're praying? But then you're not addressing why taking a knee means more to you than police brutality.
Right, because context matters.
Context matters, yeah. And it was really a lot of context missing from the debate, and it was very one-sided. And it was just something where it was like, you are kind of eliminating us from this moment.
Right.
And finally, just real quick before we go, the context around why it was racist to use an ape to signify an African-American woman. A lot of people have suggested to me on Twitter, on social media, look, we've seen pictures of Donald Trump compared to an orangutan. Why is that not racist? Well, it's not racist because historically, going back to the founding of this country, people in this country have used that kind of imagery of African-Americans looking like apes or sounding like apes or behaving like apes as a way to diminish the humanity of African-American people, to say that you're not fully human, that you're subhuman, that you're 3/5 of a man or a woman, and that was used to keep people from voting, and that was used to keep people from owning property, and to being able to even read and get an education. And so people seem to not understand why saying Valerie Jarrett is an ape is racist.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's really you just didn't pay attention in history class or Darwin
science. I know, when you say people seem to not understand.
No, I'm like, is it that, or is it that you're just saying that to try to make it okay? The same way Roseanne was trying to say that she didn't know Valerie Jarrett was black.
Right.
And it was just like, where have you guys been?
Well, then explain the Susan Rice tweet, which clearly you did know.
And was she on Ambien when she said that Susan Rice was like an ape?
Right, and then, being called monkey, ape, these things, like you mentioned, it's been weaponized against black people. It's not just an adjective or something you could compare it to. And we've been through this. Enough white people have made this mistake in the past for you to see that it's not something to be said. When you say it, you're choosing to say it. You know it's wrong. And so don't try to at least, pretend like, oh, well, we've called this white person an ape before, too. Well, that person's ancestors were never diminished or, you know, torn apart or enslaved because people really thought that they were, you know, closer to a monkey or an ape than another race. So it was completely out of line. And anybody who was like, oh, I didn't know, should really maybe go pick up a history book or something, because it's out there. We have Google. It's free. It's on our phones. It's there.
Sylvia Obell, thank you so much.
We love having you. Thank you very much for coming.